London is home to approximately 13 million people and is seen as one of the great capitals of the world. But in August 2011, the world saw a different side of London. Gangs of youth, looting, rioting and causing civil disturbance. Unsurprisingly, gang life is nothing new in London. It has been an integral part of society for many youth across the city, mostly originating from deprived areas in London, like blocks and estates. Behind each gang can be found hundreds of hidden stories. And as we discover tonight, some of these stories can be closer to home than expected.
I grew up with a lot of people who were from underprivileged backgrounds, probably like myself as well, to an extent, but I never really got deeply involved in gangs. However, of course, a lot of my friends were, and you know, all sorts of things went on. You'd hear stories all the time, and of course I was hearing it most of the time firsthand from these people, so I knew it to be true. The types of feuds that they had with other rival gangs. You know, I had friends and colleagues who had been stabbed, who were in comas for long periods of time. I had colleagues who, you know, robbed the post office and come out with substantial amounts of money and so on and so forth. And I had friends who had actually killed somebody as well. So, of course, you know, gang violence or being aware of gang violence or having people who were close to me who were in the thick of it was part of my life growing up.
Tonight, In the Know asks Abd Al-Rauf Shokoya about his experiences growing up, being dangerously close to gang life. Alongside being a presenter on Ahlulbayt TV, Abd Al-Rauf Shokoya works for a number of Islamic organizations propagating the teachings of the Holy Household. Abd Al-Rauf is also married and the proud father of 2 healthy children.
A little bit about my background is I've been a Muslim now since 1994. So I guess this summer will be 18 years. So coming from a Christian background, and in 1994 I'd like to say I like to think I saw the light, and alhamdulillah I became a Muslim and a follower of the Ahlulbayt alayhimus salam. I had a good friend of mine who was Muslim already, and he basically started telling me about his religion. And the angle which he came from was talking about Isa alayhi salam, Jesus Christ, peace and blessing be upon him. And obviously that caught my interest, coming from a Christian background and obviously having that connection to Jesus Christ. And it kind of just spiraled from there, really. After those first couple of discussions that I had with the brother, I think my interest just continued to grow and grow until slowly but surely I basically just started to do research, went to my library, got books, and took it from there, really, and then started entering into discussions with Muslims whenever I'd meet them. And yeah, alhamdulillah, slowly but surely, I think it took about 9 months, and then I decided to take my shahada.
He has lived in Newham, East London, for most of his life, and took us on a brief tour of what is one of the most deprived areas in the United Kingdom.
This area of East London is called Newham. Newham is one of the most deprived boroughs in the whole country. It, you know, has a very poor health record, lots of diseases. The age of death is quite low as well, relatively low compared to other places. The schools, alhamdulillah, the schools are doing a lot better. But even the schools, a lot of the schools in the borough are failing schools, classified as failing schools. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of a place to live, you know, it's probably not one of the safest places to live. Yet, you know, I guess for people like myself who've lived in the borough pretty much all my life, or at least most of it, you know, I'm not intimidated by the borough. I'm not intimidated by some of the gangs that live in the borough. You know, I guess having come from a similar background to them, you know, touch wood, I've been lucky. I've never really had to experience any, you know, dodgy situations and stuff. I think London is a melting pot. London is a very funny place in that you may have boroughs which are a lot more affluent, but London's a melting pot in the sense that in an area or in literally 2 streets apart, you can have a council estate which is quite bad with a lot of you know, bad behaviour by the youngsters. And then on another street just around the corner, you can have a very affluent street where, you know, the incomes are considerably higher, the crime rate is considerably lower. So I think, funny enough, that's one of the good things about London, that even though you do have disparities in terms of what people earn and how much they're worth, if you like, when it actually comes down to the nitty-gritty of you know, people's interaction with other people, you can have the rich living alongside the poor, especially in a place like London. So other boroughs, yes, of course, there are a lot boroughs which are a lot richer than Newham, a lot more affluent than Newham. However, I think, you know, you get pockets of, you know, crime and gang violence in everywhere in a place like London, and of course not just London, further afield as well in the UK.
Living in such a deprived and dangerous area begs the question, does Abd Al-Rauf ever fear for the safety of himself or his family?
Again, as I said to you before, on a personal level, not really, you know, because obviously my lifestyle, you know, I'm a young father with 2 young children, so my lifestyle doesn't really cause me to interact or, you know, come into contact with a lot of the kids out there who are maybe involved in gangs and so on and so forth. So on a personal level, it doesn't really affect me, and as I said, touch wood, I've been quite lucky in that, you know, no one's ever really tried to attack me or anything like that. Once or twice my wife has been in intimidated situations, but alhamdulillah, you know, we've never really had a situation that has not been able to be dealt with. So yeah, it's not been too bad. Of course, one of the roles that I had up until last year was actually speaking to a lot of youngsters from a Muslim background and speaking to them about some of the experiences that they've had growing up, and maybe some of the peer pressure that they've been under, some of them who have been parts of gangs and maybe, you know, even got involved in violence and so on and so forth. Yeah, I think pretty much that's been most of it, really. But I think when you've grown up in an area like this, I think you are streetwise to a certain degree. And when you're streetwise, you know, you can't say nothing will ever happen to you, but, you know, you don't necessarily get so intimidated by some of the goings on that happens. And again, you know, it's a case of not being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think that's got a lot to do with your lifestyle. You know, if you are living a life of, let's not say crime, but if you're living a life of, you know, doing things that are frowned upon by society and by the religion of Islam, then of course you're more than likely to find yourself in situations where you're having to defend yourself, or you're having to, God forbid, you know, carry out violence on another person. So it's got a lot to do with lifestyle. So luckily for me, yes, we are victims of crime to an extent. I've had my car broken into before, but, you know, personal violence on me or personal attacks on me or members of my family, no, alhamdulillah, I think we've been quite fortunate that nothing's happened to us.
Street gangs instill a sense of fear in society and thrive in antisocial behaviour. One wonders, why would youth be drawn into such behaviour? Noor Majid, a graduate of psychology from Roehampton University, believes she has the answer.
Psychology has shown that gangs, generally youth, join gangs because they want to feel the sense of belonging to certain groups. They also feel like they've been excluded by every other area, whereas to be from schools, from families, and so they're trying to integrate those gangs to feel like they belong to someone. Also, research has shown that these youth also tend to join so that they could be protected from other gangs if they've been subject to some type of aggression. They tend to go to these groups so they can be protected. Research has also shown that they tend to join for money purposes. They go there so that they could even if it's by stealing or intimidating others, they go and they get some money to go back and either support their family or just support themselves and be able to get what they really want and what they need.
Noor Majid, like Abd Al-Rauf, lives in London, and much like Abd Al-Rauf, she is also aware of the influence that gangs have on her area.
I decided to study psychology because I thought psychology was one of those main subject areas that would be able to tell me about human behaviors and would be able to allow me to implement them to the outer world. I've always been interested to find out why certain people carry out certain behaviors and why there is devious, antisocial or pro-social as well. Helping out, it's not just mainly about helping out others, it's also to see the reasons why certain behaviors are carried out and why they affect the society in general. There are two main gangs in my area. I know that they've been influenced by the schools that are around Wembley. I know that they are from Preston Manor School, High School, and also Kingsbury. And from what I've seen, that they're overtaking the area, and sometimes at night people are tended to be scared to walk around, and especially during after school times, knowing that they could be attacked or harassed by them. I do personally fear for my family. I do feel like sometimes at night, coming out of stations or after schools, that they could be attacked, especially around certain stations, such as South Kenton, for example. I know that there are loads of groups and loads of gangs around there, ganging up around, who do look a bit suspicious, ready to attack. So I do fear for my family coming out at night and after school, and I do fear for my friends as well, thinking that sometimes they could be attacked if they're not aware of something, if they're not watching their back. You hear loads of crimes in the media. You hear that most of them take part in this area. So you do fear that I do fear that they could be attacked or could be subject to gang exposure. These youth generally come from lower classes, so they have their families that are not supported by the welfare system, as the government does not give them enough money as well to support their children. So they decide to go and join these gangs for money purposes. And also, London has been, the schools in London, some of them, in those lower classes areas, they don't provide a certain amount of support to their students to give them after school classes, after school activities, to keep them busy and off the streets. They tend to find themselves going to school, to these groups for entertainment and to have some type of fun, these result into big gangs and eventually result into crimes.
Based on Noor's findings, it seems there are many factors that push youth toward gang culture. Abd Al-Rauf was never, himself, part of a gang. But did the exposure to such a life influence him at all?
If it had an influence on my life personally, it's not something that I can necessarily put into words or try and assess how it manifested itself. But of course it impacted on, again, friends' lives in the sense that, they were so involved in the gang culture, so deeply involved in the gang culture that it literally took over their lives. I mean, for a lot of people, it almost becomes a substitute for family, or in a lot of cases, it's not even a substitute for family, but their family, because maybe they don't necessarily have a family at home, or the relationship with their parents or their guardians isn't as it should be. And so, yeah, I mean, it affected a lot of people in the sense that, they got so involved in the gang, were so loyal to the gang, and would literally do anything for the gang that, they would sometimes even, fight and maim other human beings, sometimes kill other human beings for the gang. And so obviously, when that happens, you're almost writing your life off, because if you end up being sent to jail for taking another person's life, you're probably not going to get out until you're in your late 30s or 40s in some cases. So unfortunately, for a lot of people that was the case. For others, of course, they managed to mature and grow up, and at some point in the future, maybe it be in their early 20s, they slowly but surely begin to realize that the gang culture isn't the answer to all of their problems and all of the ills of society, and then they move on. And for a lot of people, they actually are able to move away and make a decent life for themselves. You have this sense of camaraderie, you have this sense of belonging. You feel as though you have a place in this world, you have a place within. And it's weird as well, because even within certain gangs, obviously I don't know about many, but even within certain gangs, you have certain relationships that take place in that gang, and a hierarchical relationship. So you could be the main guy of that gang, or you could be one of the, if you like, lieutenants, or you could be literally a foot soldier, and you would get treated accordingly. So, I mean, it's almost like in a weird, warped type of way, it's almost like a family structure again. So you have this family structure, and you have these different, if you like, levels or statuses in the particular gang. But I think it's about status, it's about being respected, it's about feeling some worth, so having self-esteem in yourself. And a gang gives you all of these things. Of course, the criteria that a lot of the gangs will use would be the things that we wouldn't necessarily consider to be right. So not in terms of, I don't know, aspirations or how good a human being you are. No, it's different things like, for some of my friends, it was about how much gold you had on, your wrist and your neck, and what clothes you were wearing, and what car you were driving, and, all of the other things that come, the paraphernalia that comes with it. Brotherhood and loyalty, which are found in gangs, are positive aspects of gang culture. But of course, when I say that, I have to temper my words very carefully, because the context in which we're talking about loyalty and brotherhood is in a totally different. I mean, sometimes loyalty and brotherhood means somebody may have done a very abominable crime, and somebody else will take the responsibility for that crime, and even if it means going to jail on behalf of that other individual. So yes, that's definitely loyalty, that's probably brotherhood as well, but of course it's not something that we would necessarily commend. But of course the fact, and I've witnessed this from observing some of my friends in gangs in the past, that I have known at least one gang whereby I could literally say there was a time where almost all of the individuals within that group would have almost definitely put their life on the line for the other members of that group. And there had been in a few situations where they literally had to be together as one, otherwise it would have come apart. And the irony was, there were many other people out there who were very envious of the fact that they had this relationship, that they were so strong. But of course, as with anything, when it's founded on something which is not haqq, not truth and not reality, sooner or later it falls apart. So after a while, they all went their separate ways. Some stayed in, some got out, and others made a decent life for themselves. And I think this society has changed a lot. When I was growing up, we as youngsters had a lot to do. Literally sports. There wasn't really much time in the day that you had free. And life has changed so much now. So I'm not even sure it's necessarily a gang thing. I just think it's a societal thing whereby a lot of children now, a lot of youth and young adults are leaving school, or at least finishing school on a particular day, and not having a great deal to do. Unless they go home and lock themselves behind their door, they're literally bored. A lot of the youth centres that I remember going to as a youngster no longer exist, but for a few months in the year where the weather's quite pleasurable as it is at the moment, the idea of going and doing something in the park doesn't apply. It gets dark after 4 o'clock. So I think a lot of the times when we're talking about antisocial behaviour and gangs and so on and so forth, we always have to put these things into perspective as well. Not that it justifies their actions, but if you can keep children occupied, if you can keep children off the street, then you minimise the risks of them joining gangs.
I do think that living in London has had a major influence on gang culture and the formation of gang culture. The welfare system provided by the government does not provide enough money and security for those youth. If you see that they're not mainly financially, they're not supported by the government at all. They've been given, if you look at it, there is a system it was the EMA system, which gives them £30 a week. And many of them think that it's not enough for them to survive on or to just barely live. So they go and join these gangs so they can be financially, they could support themselves financially.
It is quite evident that gangs are formed due to many different reasons and have a large influence on the city. So what does one do if he finds himself in a situation dealing with a gang? Hussein Sukni, a trainee youth worker, provides his 2 cents.
Just get smart with them. Tell them, just ask them questions like, are you sure you want to do this? You'll get in trouble. Don't get angry, don't get aggressive with them. Just tell them, I'm walking by, I live in this area, I'll see you every day. The police might find out, people might be looking at you, they might know your face. They'll obviously get angry at you, but they'll definitely won't rob you. So that's a neat trick that my friend taught me. I hope you lot can use it if you do get approached. Inshallah you don't.
Hussein Sukni works with youth on a daily basis and sees firsthand the reasons youth get involved in gang life and gang culture.
I finished my youth working course a couple of years back, and since then I've been working in a youth club which is down in Queen's Park, where we engage with a wide variety of youth and a wide range of problems that approach us, and we have to deal with them in different ways. I wasn't actually in my life planned to go into youth work. I kind of went into it because I used to actually attend a youth club myself. I like the structure of it, so I was thinking, let me be part of the management team of the youth club. Let me try organize a few things myself. And then from there, so a few doors opened up to me, where there was a youth working course and there's like a sports leadership course where I'd done them, and then now it helps me run the youth club even better and helps me interact with the youth in a different way, where we can understand each other and where I can influence them more. There are many ways where you can stop youth from joining gangs, and that's through finding the common grounds where the gangsters and the ones who are away from gangs, where they can all interact with each other. That way they can learn from each other's pros, and inshallah we can help them. And if we are planning a youth club, this is the basic layout. We get them to learn from each other's pros, and we push away the cons. From both sides, gangsters and the non-gangsters. So when the gangsters come to the youth club, they interact with the activities that we have set out, and there could be poetry, and through that poetry they learn about religious doings and traditional doings about Islam, and through other activities such as football. Football is a very excellent way to get youth to interact, and we can set in certain rules like no swearing, no back chat, no none of this, none of that, or you get a yellow card, for example. That way they learn through the activities that they like what's right and what's wrong.
We live in a society that demonizes not just gangs, but often youth as well. Such can be seen in the media. Is this why youth are pushed to join gangs? And why else exactly do youth join gangs?
Yes, I think that gangs, to an extent, have been portrayed badly by the media, and maybe this explains why they behave the way they do. However, of course, the youngsters, although they're still relatively young, some of these still have a responsibility to act maturely. I mean, intimidating behaviour, anybody that's been in close proximity to a gang knows what it feels like when you're not quite sure if they are going to turn on you and so on and so forth. So, I mean, and antisocial behaviour as well, obviously as well. So I think it works both ways. We have demonised the individuals, and sometimes when you demonise individuals, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that they then will start acting the way in which you have been dealing with them. Yet on the same side, of course, those individuals, those youngsters, those members of these gangs also have a responsibility to act in a way in which people can't criticise them.
Research has shown that the upbringing of children has an influence on them actually joining, whether they join gangs or not. From the researchers have found out that most children, they join from younger age, from the age of about 11, and they do leave the gang around the age of 25, 30. So during that period of time, it's where parents are supposed, have the biggest influence and the biggest impact. Theories on bullying have showed that children that younger adults that do join gangs are either known bullies in their schools or being subject to bullying at home, subject to upbringing from families. If they're being bullied at home, generally they tend to go, and because they can't take it out at home and on their other siblings or their mom, on their drinking mother or their father, they go and take it out on other members of the society. So they generally do that in either their school gangs. They form small group gangs to go and bully people who are not as able to defend themselves, or go form gangs and they go bully out more people, or they result into antisocial behaviour, crimes, even sometimes murder, because they feel like their family background is not there to support them initially, so they go out there to go and prove themselves in a way, because they kind of need to find this self-identity within them.
There are a number of reasons why I think youth become involved in gang culture. One of the reasons could be family breakdown. So if a child or children come from a family situation which isn't functioning properly, this can quite easily push them towards the gang culture. I think it's partly boredom as well. I think the fact that a lot of these youth don't have anything to do with their time, it ends up being spent just getting up to mischief. Of course, to a lesser extent, because I think initially when people get involved in gangs, things like drugs and violence aren't necessarily top of the list. People just tend to hang around with people of the same age, from the same particular area that they live in, and so on and so forth. And yes, slowly but surely, some of those individuals within that gang get involved in drugs, and then it escalates from there. So I'm not sure it's any one thing. I think there are a number of factors involved.
There are some psychologists that do suggest that individuals that do join youth gangs and gangs in general have some certain types of personalities. Research has shown that most of them actually have type A personality, which makes them more aggressive, more competitive, more prone to be exposed to antisocial behaviour, and also to be more highly achievers. Highly achievers in the sense that in groups, in gangs, they're generally required by the leader to go and commit certain crimes so that they could feel this type of belonging and this type of connection to the rest of the group. So highly achievers, these type A personalities go there to go and prove to the rest of the gang that they are able to do what they want and be able to show who they are. This kind of shows this type, it just gives them this reassurance and allows them to have this self-identity. This other theory is called the social learning theory, which psychologists have, Bandura has said that generally gangs are formated if personalities who join gangs are personalities who play a lot of video games, and because they're prone to be, they see loads of antisocial behaviours and they see loads of aggression in those video games, and they feel like they need to go into those gangs and reproduce them and to release their anger over there.
A long time ago, Abd Al-Rauf drifted away from his age mates involved in gang life. He became Muslim 18 years ago and is now a working man and a loving father of two. Long ago, he made the decision to leave such friends and their lives behind, choosing the better path of a fork road that dictated his future to him. Much like other Muslims, he now finds his life following a set of rules given to him by the command of God. It does, however, leave one to wonder, are Muslims exempt from the clutches of gang culture? The answer to this is most definitely no.
Unfortunately, we have to realise that us as Muslims are not immune from any of the ills of society. So whether it's gang culture, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether it's high divorce rates, whether it's domestic violence, you name it. Whether it's materialism, you name it. Whatever society is suffering from, we as Muslims unfortunately are suffering from it as well. Of course, we should be able to battle these ills and these symptoms a lot better because of the fact that we have Islam. But you know, having Islam or being a Muslim and then actually implementing it in its true way, in its true manifest itself properly is very difficult. So I think sometimes we as Muslims aren't necessarily following our deen, or following the religion of Islam in the way in which it was intended.
Sheikh Ahmed Haneef is a scholar at the Islamic Centre of England. Whilst he may not have been exposed to gangs like Abd Al-Rauf was, he is well aware of the attraction for the youth to gang culture. Seeing gang life as a growing problem in the Muslim community as well as the greater community, he lectured in a seminar addressing Islam's perspective on the issue and referred his thoughts to In the Know afterward.
I am a cleric employed by the Islamic Centre of England. My name first, Ahmed Haneef. Basically doing interface stuff with the youth, with non-Muslims, an ecumenical type of thing, English programs, and all that is necessary to make Islam more mainstream in this society. My exposure to gang culture is limited, but I do know and have known people who had been and are still associating with gangs. Gang culture is something that is very, very important and quite prevalent among youth who are basically alienated from society, and who are looking for some kind of fellowship, some kind of companionship. Basically is a higher level of peer group, actually. There's this concept in Islam called futuwa, okay, where youth in Islam are encouraged as youth to be able to stand up for truth and reform in society and leadership in terms of righting wrongs in society. Such a thing does not really exist in modern Western society. And because it is something I believe that is essential to young men and young women especially, people end up forming such things, but for the wrong reasons. Basically, they tend to be deviated. So the forming of a gang really is nothing but the expression of the need for, let's say, age group type of social organization, okay, that has a social impact, But in a society based upon things like individualism, a society based upon consumerism, a society based upon values that are not integrative and wholesome, you find that these groups tend to form gangs, And I think gangs, therefore, nothing but the expression of something natural in young people, that we could reform, and create groups that are based on the principle of futuwa, where young people could organize themselves to help the weak, to support the poor, you know, to move for social change and exhorting the right and forbidding the wrong. It goes back to the essential natural needs of human beings, right? Loyalty, devotion, fearlessness, and so forth, okay? This is what these youth groups in Islam are oriented towards. When you look at, for example, the war, the 8-year war between Iran and Iraq, young people, you know, contributed their youth to fighting in the war and defending their environment and so on, you see? So yes, these traits are very, very important. You know, the problem is that in the underclass, these traits are applied for the wrong reasons or in the wrong context, you know? And I think this is something that we can work with to be able to sort of like reform that type of trend. And I think it can be quite influential on changing society.
So how exactly can we solve this issue? How can we prevent Muslim youth from joining gangs?
I think we have to create an alternative, okay? We have to create an Islamic alternative. Once we have an Islamic alternative, youth groups that have the calling to impact upon society in a positive way, you know, with the same type of values like loyalty, devotion, strength, athleticism, discipline, and so forth, I think it would be quite, it would take quite a way, it would go quite a way in bringing youth away from being attracted to deviant forms of gang culture.
I'm not sure I would go as far as to say it's a fault of Muslim communities, but I think one thing definitely is for sure, that we need to recognize this is a problem, and this problem may, we hope that it won't, but this problem may get worse. It may even escalate in certain areas. And so we need to start thinking ahead. We need to think proactively about what it is we can do as a community to ensure that if there's any of our youth who go down this road, we should have the support structures in place to enable them to get back onto the right path. We need to start thinking about, you know, maybe training social workers from the Muslim community who can use not just their skills as social workers, but also the knowledge that they have about Islam and the teachings of Islam and the advice that Islam gives, and maybe use the two to strengthen their position in terms of ensuring that they can serve these youth in their times of need, because although they may be doing something wrong, they also need help to get out of that particular situation they find themselves in. If we're talking about London specifically, London is a very funny place, but if we can, like what I've seen in other parts of the world, in North America and parts of Africa as well, is that a lot of the Islamic centers that are built, they take the youth into consideration. So they don't just build a mosque or a Husseiniya. They will make sure that they have facilities for the youth, games rooms, they'll have gym facilities. They will try and ensure that every element of the community is catered for. And I think this is probably one of the ways in which we can ensure that a lot of our youth aren't doing anything or are not tempted to go down the road of joining gangs. And of course, other activities, simple things like joining the Boy Scouts, for example, or, I don't know, getting our children into learning martial arts or playing football, or, you know, extra tuition classes, Quranic classes, Islamic classes during the week and of course on the weekend, because I truly believe that if children are occupied, then there's less chance for them to want to go down the road of joining gangs.
Abd Al-Rauf has been on a roller coaster of a ride. Experiencing life for its twists and turns, he knows deep down that life could have been very different for him were he to have made different decisions.
I think the difference in my life now compared to before, when I was exposed to gang culture, or indirectly exposed to gang culture, is that I think I would say more than anything else is a peace about me, because in those days and prior to Islam, in my case, but I think for a lot of gang members as well, is that you never really have peace. You're always looking over your shoulder, waiting for the next attack by a rival gang. And in addition to that, even if you're not necessarily fearing an attack from a rival gang, you always thinking that you're not quite adequate enough. You suffer from low self-esteem because no matter how much money you have, there's always somebody else that's got more. Or if your car isn't quite up to scratch, that makes you feel somehow lower, inadequate in ways, and so on and so forth. And of course the aspirations of individuals who are, the difference between individuals who, when they're within a gang, all it is about waking up late in the day and making sure they're with their friends from the gang, getting up to no good, having to, protect gang members or at least fight for gang members if anything happens. That's the aspirations of a gang. Obviously, it's a very simplistic idea. There are others who maybe are slightly more ambitious. But when you step out of that life and you have a better worldview, then obviously your aspirations change. You aspire to become relatively successful, in terms of a career, in terms of obviously looking for an appropriate partner, children, etc., etc. Your focus and your worldview changes. My past experiences have taught me, and of course the lessons that I can take into my life today, is that friendships, no matter how close you feel you are to certain individuals when you're in your younger years, those friendships tend to die out. Not necessarily always. Some friends stay friends for life, of course, but the relationships change as you grow older, as your aspirations change, as your ambitions and aims and objectives in life change. You don't necessarily always see eye to eye, or your route and your way in life doesn't necessarily mirror those of your friends. And so, at a time in your life when you feel like these people are my blood and they would die for me, so on and so forth, it doesn't necessarily manifest itself that way, just generally. And of course, I think one of the lessons of Islam is that friends may not necessarily be friends for life. 1 minute they could be your best friend, and the next minute that person may turn on you or become a disbeliever, and so on and so forth. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons I think anybody can take from that kind of life prior to Islam. It's really a life that has no longevity to it whatsoever. You're going to be a part of a gang for a short period of your life, and if one is not careful, that lifestyle and the things that you get up to while being a part of that gang could harm you for life. Literally, members of gangs, you'll either grow out of it, or God forbid you'll end up in jail, or even worse, end up being killed. And I remember there was one person I met very recently, actually, who was part of a gang when I was growing up, and he was in a very sorry state. I mean, he literally was a drug addict, and he recognized me and came up to me and asked me for money because of the fact that, I could tell just from the way he was behaving that he needed to feed his habit. So, there are very few happy stories that come out of it in the long run. You may have one or two friends for life, but you'll find that even those friendships will be in a totally different context. You won't be, gang members, in inverted commas, walking down the streets of your area, representing your area. Things change. And so people should try their best, if they can, not to get involved in the first place.
Gang life will remain an epidemic in London for a very long time. But people like Abd Al-Rauf, who have witnessed it firsthand, hopes that those who want to go into gang life will make the right decision and choose life over an unfulfilling life of materialistic desires, anger, and possible demise. Meanwhile, Abd Al-Rauf, much like many of the 13 million living in London, continues to live his life without looking over his shoulder.